Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. I'm Tash.
I'm Bernice.
And we're not pundits.
We're just two women who know what a ruck is.
Well, of course it is Men's Six Nations Week. However, we cannot ignore some of the action that happened in the Vodacom URC this weekend with all of the South African derbies unfolding. I think, Bernice, you're very happy about the weekend, or the past two weekends for the Sharks. We'll be talking about the South African derbies between the DHL Stormers and the Hollywoodbets Sharks, plus the Emirates Lions hosted the Vodacom Bulls this weekend in round 11 of the URC. As always, if you enjoyed this episode of Her Side of the Ruck, please like the episode. And if you're new to the community, hit the red subscribe button. It's great to have you with us. But let's get into this episode on the South African derbies. Let's start with the Shark bite ×2 against the Storm. We're both wearing black. You've obviously got your Sharks jersey on. Sharks fan, you're really happy. What's your initial thoughts just on a great 2 weeks for a Sharks supporter?
Yeah, I think I'm wearing it tonight because, I don't get the chance to wear it a lot. So, yeah, it's our time to shine now. But yeah, no, I think the past 2 weeks have been great in terms of the Sharks. And I think the season started out very rocky for them. A lot of changes, obviously, with John Plumtree leaving the Sharks. So it's been a very tough season, and we've only had one away win, and that was under JP Peterson, which is not great, but his record to me is insane. We've won 5 out of 7 games under him, which I think is definitely a step in the right direction. And even though we still have a lot of work to do, I think there are a lot of positives that we can take from the past 2 weeks. I definitely did not think that the Sharks would win both of the matches, especially the one, especially the one at DHL, because we've spoken about how the Stormers take a lot of pride in playing in front of their home crowd. Not that they didn't, but I just thought it was kind of a done deal. They'll win at DHL and the Sharks might win at Hollywoodbets, or other way around, but it won't be 2-0 for either team.
Yeah.
So I have to say I was pleasantly surprised at least. But yeah, I think it's definitely, there are a lot of positive signs for the Sharks, and just seems like the team are a bit happier to be playing together, and it seems like there's a shift in the culture, and I think that's something that we haven't seen under John Plumtree. I think he had quite a hard time, but yeah, overall very happy.
I totally get what you say about the shift in culture. There were a lot more smiles on their faces over both rounds, I thought, like just seeing the joy, even whether it was coming from a driving maul or finding that gap. And there's been some standout performers. Grant Williams, I know he's one of your favourites. Ethan Hooker, I mean, can we just get a round of applause for him? Because I think he's been fantastic, and I know he's one of your favourite players. And I saw, did you see the sign that said, "Ethan, will you be my hooker? No, be my Valentine." I thought that was so funny. That's one thing I always say the South Africans are great at doing, is getting the boards and getting the roaming camera guy to focusing on the boards. I absolutely love it.
I don't know if you saw the other one. I'll see if I can find the graphic and you can put it on the screen. But it was one that said, what was it? I used DHL Stormers as my password and it didn't want to work because it said weak password or something like that. So that was also very, very clever.
That is savage.
Yeah. So people are so clever with the posters.
I love it. I mean, let's talk about the Stormers for a minute, because having been unbeaten in the URC and unbeaten in the Champions Cup until they go away to Harlequins at the Stoop and really did not put out a very strong performance at all. Then they win the following week against Leicester Tigers, and then they have 2 games lost on the bounce. So they lose 3, win 2 in January. Like, is this a blip, or are we seeing maybe a losing streak unfolding for the Stormers? I don't know what your thoughts on that were.
I'm also very unsure of kind of where the shift happened. And yes, they had a very bad loss against Harlequins, but it was also a completely different side that they put out. I think their first bad performance, if you can call it that way, was against La Rochelle. They managed to win that match quite well and quite convincingly. But I think that's kind of where things started going wrong for them. So it was they won against La Rochelle, and then it was the loss against Harlequins, and then the Stormers played Leicester. And even though they managed to win that game, you and I both kind of said, Leicester came to play, and even with all of Leicester's travel chaos,
Yeah, so
they
many travel
almost
issues.
managed to, yeah, and they almost managed to, I wouldn't say win the game, but they made it really hard for the Stormers on that day. And even then, like I was watching the crowd react to some of the things that the Stormers did, and some of the people were quite upset by the way that the Stormers played, and even John Dobson wasn't quite happy with the way they performed. So I think there were glimpses of it coming through in, as you've said, in January. So I don't know what it is. I know the Stormers had a few injuries, so it's difficult for them to kind of build the consistency throughout the season that they had last year when they did have their 8, 9, 10 consecutive wins. So I don't know if that is playing a role, if the season is starting to get a little bit too long. But yeah, I think they'll probably be back in terms of their winning ways. We know how unhappy John Dobson has
Oh,
been in the
he can
past
get,
with
yeah.
yeah, and
He's
he's
not a man to
outspoken
hold back
about
on
it.
his words, is he?
Exactly, and he doesn't sugarcoat anything. You
No.
can see that they're a team that actually talks about reasons why, they haven't performed the way they would like to. So he won't let this slide, and there are a 4-week break for the URC return. So I'm sure this time off will be good for all of the teams, but I think especially for the Stormers just to regroup and evaluate what has been going on the past few weeks.
100% a bit of rest and recovery. I thought there was quite a lot of nerves, particularly in the kickoffs from round 10. Like both teams failed to cleanly gather, first from the kickoff when it was at the DHL Stadium, which then set the platform for the
Mm.
Hollywoodbets Sharks' first try. And then Stormers score a few minutes later on because Sharks can't gather from the restart kick. So it's just like those are small errors which professional teams of that standard shouldn't really be making. So then do you put it down to,
Mm.
was everybody just a bit nervous? Like it's a big South African derby. The DHL was sold out. It looks like Kings Park as well was sold out the following weekend. So there's a lot on the line. Pride, a hell of a lot of pride and bragging rights, I'm sure.
Mm.
But South Africans are so passionate about their rugby. So when their club teams win, so I'm glad to see that you're beaming because for too long we've talked about the Sharks and I've not seen a smile on your face. So I thought the kickoff, the restart, it wasn't great from either team at the start of round 10, but I want to talk about that second try for the Sharks in round 10. That crossfield kick from Jaden Hendrickson to Jacko Williams. Jacko Williams' first URC try. He goes on to score plenty more in these two derbies, which is brilliant. I love when that attacking platform comes off. It's one of my favourite plays in rugby.
Definitely, and I think Jaden Hendricks has been such a key player in the last few weeks since his return in the team. We saw it against when we played the Vodacom Bulls at the Hollywoodbets Kings Park. That's kind of where it all started. But I think he's been super consistent. He hasn't really been playing for the Springboks, hasn't really been selected in any of the squads and
Sure.
any of the touring squads. So it's good to see that he's performing well. I think there has been a period where people have said, his service around like the ruck area is quite slow, and there's certain things that just someone like Grant Williams and Cobus Reinach does a lot better than Jaden
Yeah.
Hendricks, which I definitely agreed with at that point. But I've always been a massive fan of Jaden Hendricks. I think he's your typical scrum half that chirps the ref and that chirps players, and don't think anyone will
Yeah.
ever forget the Munster match.
Oh God,
Um,
no.
yeah, I've always been a fan, and he's so emotionless in his expressions. But
He's
besides that, I
funny.
think he is a very talented player. So it's good to see that he's back to those ways. And what I
Mm.
really like to see is players like Yaka Williams coming into the Shark squad. That's not someone that we bought again from an overseas club, and that we're bringing in like someone who's an old Sharks player or someone who's been at the Bulls so it's nice to see that we're actually developing young players. I'm not too sure where Yaka Williams is from originally. So I might have to just check that. But either way, it's good to see that there are young blood coming in. We're not
100%.
buying players, we're actually developing players. Yeah, I think the Sharks have bought enough players now. Now it's time to actually develop the young players.
Bring in the young talent,
Yeah.
have someone there for a long time. And I've said it
Mm.
before on the pod, when you've got that loyalty from a young age,
Mm.
okay, there might be times where people think in their career, actually a move would be helpful for my career, but I'm seeing it quite a lot over in England through the academy system, where a
Mm.
lot of homegrown players, I would like to say, won't leave, but with the financial situations, it does make sense to move to another club so you can earn a bit more money, but you also learn stuff from being in different environments. Like Andre Esterhazen's a perfect example of that. Like from
Mm.
what you've told me about when he was previously at the Sharks, then going to Harlequins, he was one of Harlequins' key playmakers when he was playing at the Stoop, and then now he's gone back to the Hollywoodbets Sharks, and he's a better player than ever before. Is in the starting squad for the Springboks. So sometimes a move can be helpful, but you do need to bring in that young talent and try and retain that young talent, because if you've got someone who's got a good culture, good skill from a young age, and you can feed that through until if they remain fit until they're
Mm.
early 30s, then you've got a lot of consistency in the club. And I think from what you've told me about the Sharks, that kind of has been the thing with the old boys, but there needs to be a transition to a more younger generation and younger player led. So I'm glad to see that they put out a really comprehensive performance, and that driving maul, particularly in round 10, 80% of the highlights was the Hollywoodbets Sharks driving maul. Like I'm a Leicester fan, so I flipping love a driving maul try, and the Sharks are going left, right, and centre with it. I loved it.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned Andre Esterhuizen. I think him, in terms of like putting him in charge of like being the captain of the Hollywoodbets Sharks, I think that's also made quite a difference, because
Mm,
now you're selecting someone that's kind of on the same level as everyone else, even though he is a Springbok and he has a few caps after his name for the Springboks. I do think it's just someone that the players can relate to. And I don't know if I'm reading it incorrectly, but that's just kind of the vibe that I'm getting from the players. And to those people who've met Andre Esterhuizen or not, like he's a really humble guy. Like he would always make time for fans, and he'll always crack a joke or two. And like he's a very humble guy. So I can just imagine the impact that must have on other players, and is also a very calm person.
mm.
So it seems like Andre Esterhuizen as well as JB Peterson are having a very positive effect on the Sharks, and it's good to see, because I think the moment that there is a culture shift, automatically players are happier, they play for each other instead of individually. So it's good to
100%.
see. And I mean, the Sharks have only won 2 games now in a row, and the performance were far from perfect. But I think you need those wins, and you need to take that and kind of ride the wave and just be like, okay, we're on the streak now. So I think for the Sharks, these 4 weeks are kind of a bad thing in a sense, because we have that momentum now, and now the Sharks need to take a break. But yeah, I mean, we'll see when we return what happens. But I think it's looking all positive.
I agree. I feel like the round 11 result, and they were down by 10 points at what, 48 minutes in, near the
Yeah.
50-minute mark. They
Yeah.
were down by 10 points, and they go on to win 36-24. The score that leveled the match at 14, although I've said this name, you've said this name plenty of times, Sasha Feinberg, Mgonzulu. That penalty kick from over 50 minutes out, excuse me, on the angle, and he slots it beautifully. Like
Yeah.
he's another person who comes across as very humble. He really
Oh.
cares, and he seems like he's got a fantastic relationship with John Dobson as well. It seems to be
Mm.
like a two-way dialogue from what we could gather from the press conference that we sat in after the Stormers
Yeah.
match versus Leicester Tigers. So he's going to be a key playmaker. The Stormers will pay a lot of money to keep him in the future, because he has been phenomenal for them. And if he's got a boot that big, if you think about club and country, that is such a big threat. And that put the pressure on the Sharks. Now, maybe the Sharks 3 months ago would have just let the Stormers run away with it. But the
Mm.
Sharks in early 2026 went, hell nah, this ain't happening. And they came back. Like, again, Grant
Yeah.
Williams, he showed his class. That delayed pass to Yako Williams around the 50, 54, 55-minute mark. I know he's one of their Grant Williams is one of your favourite players, and that is one of the reasons why his speed from the ruck, his ball passing, his accuracy, his timing. That's what you need from a scrum half. You need a scrum half to be able to go, even if I hold it for a quarter of a second, that makes such a big difference in how the defenders shift. And the line from Yako Williams was brilliant. That was a great try. The controversial ruling, which I don't think is controversial. I think the referee got it correct. The second try from Williams, where he's chasing it down and it's not gathered in the try area. When you watch the slow-mo, the only downward pressure is from the Sharks. It's not properly gathered by the Stormers. And I can imagine that John Dobson was fuming when that was given. But I do think it was the correct decision. I'm sure you'll probably agree with me on that. If you're a Stormers fan watching this, let us know what you think about this. But I think when you watch the replay, I think the referee got it bang on with the decision.
It's interesting because I think so after the match, there are a lot of talks about the ref, and that usually it's interesting because it happens a lot, but I also feel like in derbies like that, it doesn't really happen that it's a big thing in the media. Like people in the comments, yes, talk about the ref, but this
Yeah,
time around it
sure.
was quite a big talking point, which is obviously something that you don't want, but there are two controversial points apparently. So the one is where they said that Grant Williams did not take the tap on the correct mark, and the ref did not go back to check that. So I can't confirm or deny. I also didn't go back to check because I was just happy to be there. But I
Bit of love.
mean, sure, let us know what your thoughts were.
Mm,
I am still quite in two minds about the Warwick Galant and the Yako Williams try. So there are a few angles. So if you look at the angle from the back, it seems like Warwick Galant has both hands on the ball and obviously pressing down on the grass, which says they are downward pressure and he got the ball down first.
mm,
But if you look at it from a different point of view, as you've mentioned, and I look at it from a biased point of view, then obviously Yako Williams scored the try because he got
yeah,
there
yeah.
first. But I think the margins were so narrow. But I have to feel for the Stormers there. I think it could have gone either
Sure.
way. But I think from the angle that I saw from the back, it seems like Warwick Galant had both hands on the ball and he got it down first. So I do have to feel for the Stormers. The tap, though, I don't know. Like I said, I was just happy to be there. So I can't confirm or deny. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know what everyone else says.
Absolutely. One thing I will say is I think the Stormers kind of dropped off in the final 10 minutes of that game. So would they have come back and won if the try hadn't if been disallowed and it been in Stormers' favour? Well, Sharks were still ahead at that point. So
Hmm.
ifs, buts, lots of hypotheticals. But at the end of the day, the team with the most possession won, which brings me on to a couple of stats from the two derbies between the Sharks and the Stormers from rounds 10 and 11, just to give you a bit of an idea of the numbers behind of it. In round 10, the possession stats were quite significantly in the Sharks' favour, and they defeated 23 defenders, but Stormers were far better in defence. The caveat to that is if you find yourself defending because you don't have possession of the ball, of course your defence stats are going to be better. So
Hmm. Hmm.
round 11, Sharks had 70% possession. I mean, I will
Yeah.
say I think the Stormers did a very good job at securing 24 points with
Hmm.
30% possession, because it means that your red
Hmm.
zone efficiency was executed really, really well. The Stormers were more dominant at scrum time, winning 5 to Sharks' 3, but the scrum percentage for both teams, I'm going to be honest, really low. 50% for the
Yeah.
Sharks and 56% for the Stormers. For two clubs in a nation that prides itself on its scrum, from my point of view, I think it's really poor, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because to me, I think the Sharks have improved in terms of their forward play because it was
Mm,
on and off and we had a lot of injuries. And yeah, so I think last year it wasn't as good. But I think it has improved, even though the stats does not look great for either side. But I think to me, what is impressive is the Stormers forward pack is they are really good in like scrummaging, just forward play in general. So I think to me, for the Sharks to actually front up against the Stormers, that was a good thing and a positive thing from my end and from Sharks' point of view. But yeah, not ideal, not perfect, as I've mentioned. But there are improvements at least. And I think that's what the Sharks are kind of working towards. I think for the Stormers it would be a concern.
Yes.
But I think for the Sharks, we are building and we are improving bit by bit. But yeah, I think concern for the Stormers because they rely heavily on forward play and their forward pack. So yeah,
Because then it opens up the field for the back line to do all the magical stuff
exactly.
that they do with Koba Swanek at
Exactly.
9 and Sasha at 10. I mean, numbers as well, they only give a snapshot of what actually happens. They could be a good indication to what's happened in the game and explain why certain things happen, but they're not necessarily a reflection on how a team is performing, although I am going to pull out a few defence stats at the end of this episode just to give you an indication of where the South African teams are with that in the URC. But let's move on to the Emirates Lions v the Vodacom Bulls. The Bulls, wow, they've not been performing amazing this season, but somehow they've seemed to find a bit of form in the last 2 rounds of the United Rugby Championship. Against the Emirates Lions, they scored 8 tries with 61% possession. They also came off the back of that with a win in Edinburgh against Edinburgh by 2 points. So, I mean, I know we've said a lot on the channel that Edinburgh to and fro with the type of side that they want to be. But the Bulls haven't necessarily had the most positive season. They've had more losses than wins across the 2 competitions that they play in terms of the Investec Champions Cup and the URC. But it seems to look like they're finding a bit more flow, find their feet a bit more. To be honest, the Bulls just completely overpowered the Lions. Like every try, basically, the first 3 tries all came from forward pack momentum, and then the 4th, 5th, 6th try, it was opening up the field for the backline players, finding a break. But the Lions seem to be very lackluster in defence, and again, another team that just kind of to and fro with what type of side they want to be. But the Bulls just completely demolished them in when they had the ball going forward.
I think demolished is definitely the right word.
It's
I
true.
was shocked. I was quite shocked. I think something that also stood out for me was there were a lot of niggle in the Sharks versus Stormers matches. So in both of the derbies. So players, there were a lot of scuffles and, a lot of pushing and shoving and all of that. Whereas in the Bulls versus Lions game, it was just they came to play and they just demolished the Lions. They were just like, we are here to play rugby. We are demolishing them. This is, even though Johan Ackerman said that they don't like looking at it that way, but it was their revenge game for what happened at Loftus. And they absolutely
Fair enough.
came to play and they literally just scored a bunch of tries and they walked all over the Lions. And I think we've made the comparison a lot between Edinburgh and the Lions. Like the
Oh, so similar.
Lions are our Edinburgh. Like they're so inconsistent. You never
Yeah.
know what's going to happen. Like they come off one great win and then they look lackluster in another match. So the Lions are ranked 10th currently and they were ranked 7th before this weekend. So I know a lot can happen and it also is very dependent on what happens in other games. So it can still change a lot. But yeah, the Lions are so inconsistent. I think kudos to the Bulls. I think they are kind of at the same place as the Sharks now. They're coming off a very good win against Pau, a 2-point win as well, and then a win against Edinburgh away. So they're coming off 2 away wins. And now the Lions at Ellis Park. So I think it's definitely not easy games to win. And they won them even though it was close, whatever. But this match at Ellis Park, I think it was very good for the Bulls. And this is exactly what they need as well to build their confidence and to build as a team because they have also been going through a lot of changes as a team.
100% statement win. My favourite try from this match was by Harold Vorster. Did I say that
Yeah.
in South African enough? You told me some Afrikaans words, so I'm trying to. I'm not going to say on the channel what Bernice said to me, although I did use it once out and about in Cape Town. But I really like that try because he's so powerful. The carry, the way
Mm,
that he muscles in. Now, three Lions defenders attempt to wrap. It's not great defense, but I think that reflects in Lions season wide defense statistics. But the final like dot over, reach over with the ball, it's just like bam, straight in, clinical. And that's what this performance was for me for the Vodacom Bulls.
mm,
It was clinical. They went to Ellis Park to get the job done and they did it very successfully. So my question will be for the Hollywoodbets Sharks and the Vodacom Bulls, can they peak at the right time? If they're building now, the URC season is long enough that you can peak into that top eight. Top four might be a bit of a stretch for those two teams, not for
mm.
the Stormers, but I think it might be for the Sharks and the Bulls. But top eight, definitely not. I could see that in their future. My one question would be for you is I looked around at the stadium and it was quite empty. Could you give
Mm,
me any indication as to why that might be? Because I look at it, I'm like, it's a fairly local derby. There's only about an hour
mm,
between Pretoria and
mm.
Johannesburg. Why was it so empty, do you think? Is it to do with ticket prices? Is it to do with the
Mm.
form of where the two teams are? You think that more people would turn up?
It's interesting because it's been an ongoing conversation in South Africa, like Ellis Park specifically, because the Stormers have no trouble filling up their stadiums. The Sharks,
Mm.
they don't necessarily sell out each match, but there are a lot of people at every match. And so, like, the same goes with the Bulls. So I think the main thing with Ellis Park, I think it's a mixture between how the Lions are performing and the area itself. So Ellis Park's
Mm.
not necessarily a very safe area. Yeah, I don't want to go too much into it because I don't want to make anyone negative, and I also, don't want to keep overseas people away from visiting Ellis Park because it is such an
Sure.
iconic stadium. But it is just something to be mindful of when you do come or when you plan to visit. It's not that safe. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And what the municipality did is they tried to make it a lot safer in international seasons.
Sure.
So, in terms of when you take the train, that you get off directly into a tunnel and that you come out at like the stadium so that you don't have to walk around the stadium. So they put a lot of things in place to make it safer for visitors. But in terms of local derbies, and so I don't know what it looks like because I've only been to Ellis Park once, and that's when it was still quite safe. Because that was what, like in 2010 or 2011, so it was
I
quite
see.
long ago.
A long time ago now.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it was, I know in international season that's what they've tried to do, but with local derbies and with even just regular URC matches, I'm not sure what safety measures are taken. And I think it's actually very sad because Ellis Park is such an iconic stadium, or Emirates
Mm.
Airline Park. We'll always know it as Ellis Park. But yeah, so I think it's a mixture between that and just the way the Lions are performing. But I'm also kind of struggling to believe that that is the reason because the Lions are performing a lot better this time
Yeah.
this season. So yeah, I think the major thing is just the safety in and around the stadium, which is a big concern.
I think it's just important to highlight it as well because you see the broadcast footage of other stadiums that do get to sell it
Yeah.
out, and you just think like the question of why, and it's important to know because I'd love to visit Ellis Park, but there are just the nuances of
Yeah.
knowing where to go and where not to go. And it's a shame for the Lions as well as the players because you want
Yeah.
your stadium to be full. You want, or at half
Yeah.
full at least, like what Ellis Park sits a hell of a lot of people. Even if you filled a quarter of that,
Yeah.
just think of the noise that you're playing. Like as a professional athlete, surely you want that.
Mm.
So it's just, I don't think it's a case of they don't want the crowd. It's not like they don't not want the crowds. They want the crowds, but it's a case of getting them
Mm.
there, and that's something interesting. If you have any thoughts on that, please let us know, or you're local to Joburg and you want to offer some insight, please drop us a comment below. We would love to hear your perspective. Before we wrap up, let's take a look at the South African Shield. In the URC, each nation plays for a shield. You've got the Welsh Shield, the Irish Shield, the Italian Scottish Shield, because there's only two clubs for both of those countries, and then the South African Shield. You can get that beaming smile out again, Bernice, because the Hollywoodbets Sharks are right leading the way right at the top. So regardless of what happens, they'll probably get a little bit of silverware from and get the bragging rights to be the best team in South Africa, despite the wider league. But hey ho, silverware's silverware, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the URC table, I think Stormers are leading the way, but they came off what, 8 consecutive wins in the league or something like that. So of course
Yeah.
they're still going to be in the top ranks, but I don't know if we'll see them drop off or whether this is just a blip and they need the time to recover, and the men's Six Nations in the Northern Hemisphere provides that ample break for club rugby, because there has been a lot of travel with all their tours in Europe in the
Mm.
URC, and then the back and forth travel with the Investec Champions Cup too. Maybe it is just tired bodies and we'll see them come back stronger. My final stat for all of you guys. I like stats. I think it gives an indication,
Yeah.
but it
Little
might not
Steve
be,
Borthwick there.
yeah, maybe. It might not be the best pleasing stat for a lot of South African fans. Across the whole of the URC, the three teams that have the lowest defense records, like success, in 14th is the Lions, in 15th are the DHL Stormers, and in 16th, sorry, Bernice, are the Hollywoodbets Sharks. So what is happening with defence? Maybe there needs to be a bit of a defensive review for those three teams. I can't remember where the Bulls sit in that. The attacking, brilliant, or loads of stuff to make the highlight reel, but maybe that's why we're seeing a lot of high scoring games, because the defense maybe isn't where it needs to be.
Yeah.
So I would personally, as I say neutral, I'm a Glasgow Warriors fan when it comes to the URC, but I would like to see those three club teams really improve on defence in the rounds going forward. And I know some people don't like it, but I quite like a low scoring game. When there's a low scoring game, there's tit for tat, lots of collisions, you're running into a brick wall. I do like that kind of rugby, but I do also like the crossfield kicks, the running the ball down the field. So I wonder if that will be a major work on point for all of the club teams down playing in the Vodacom URC. But yeah, if you have any thoughts on the defence, the attack of any of your teams that you support in the URC, please let us know down below. Question: do you think all four South African teams can reach the top 8?
Oh, like my heart says yes, but logic says no. I think
Sure.
it's just, I don't know. I think it's just so difficult. So you have the Stormers who they're a very consistent side, and like they kicked off the season very strong with their 8 consecutive wins, and they're going through a bit of a dip now. So I think we'll only get the extent of what's happening, or we'll see like, was it just a dip, or is it how things are going to be now going forward, or will they pick up again after the 4 weeks? I think then we'll have a better idea of where each team is standing, because then it's
Yeah.
also a little bit more serious. But I think, like, I've seen it in past seasons as well, like the Sharks and the Bulls and the Stormers don't have trouble reaching the top 8, but it's when it gets to the top 8 and the playoffs where it gets tricky and where it gets
Yeah.
difficult, with the Stormers and the Bulls obviously being the most successful in terms of reaching quarters and finals and all of that. So I think this season is completely different. I don't know if
Yeah.
only one team will make it. I don't know if two. I'm hoping for a minimum of two teams
I can
that
see that
will
happening.
make it to the top 8. Because I think that's also been the standard. I think for us, a successful season would be if 3 out of the 4 South African teams make it to the top 8. But I think we've just been like, a lot of the Lions, the Sharks, the Bulls have been too inconsistent for us to actually say, okay, they'll definitely be able to make the top 8 or not. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I think my ideal would be 3 teams making it to the top 8. But whether that will actually turn into a reality,
Yeah.
I don't know. Because also, if you just look at the teams currently in the top 8, like there are some strong sides in the top 8 and teams that have
Sure.
also been consistent every year. But there are also teams that have been consistent every year that have not had a great season, like for example, Munster or Leinster. Like Leinster have not had a shitty season necessarily, but they're not where they were in the
Yeah.
past seasons in the URC. So I think a lot can still happen, and I'm excited to see how it all plays out. And I'm wondering if we're going to have a new URC champ this year again, or what's going to happen.
I know, and we'll be covering it all here on Her Side of the Ruck. We absolutely love the URC, and we hope you do too. And if you do, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for being with us. That's all we've got time for on the episode now. If you've got any thoughts or comments, do drop them down below. But we're going to sign off now. I'm Tash, signing off from the UK.
I'm Bernice, signing off from SA.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.